Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Matt from Matt's Bookshelf, and today I am talking about my results for my first time ever participating in NaNoWriMo. If you don't know what NaNoWriMo is, it is National Novel Writing Month, which happens over the course of November. It is a 30-day writing challenge in which people are tasked with writing a minimum of 1,667 words per day in order to hit a 50,000 word manuscript by the end of the month. And yes, this is my first time participating. My novel for this month was something I never worked on before, and it is a historical fiction novel covering the early life of Tiberius, mainly from his time in his early 20s, where he was rising up the ranks as both a Roman politician and Roman military leader, up to his exile to Rhodes and disillusionment with the Roman system in general. And so, yes, this is my first time writing about Tiberius, my first time writing in historical fiction, and my first time attempting NaNoWriMo, and by the end of the month, I hit 50,501 words. I managed to get to 1,667 words per day, a little over most days, actually, and overall, for my first time doing this, I really enjoyed this event, if you will. I also went as far as to making a NaNoWriMo account and everything to log my progress, even though I have the Microsoft Word page. But interestingly enough, NaNoWriMo, for your event, you have a list of achievements you can accomplish. One of the hardest ones being writing the 1,667 words per day, and you unlock that at the end of the month if you hit it. And I found all the achievements listed to be very motivating in a weird way. That's probably one of the main driving factors that kept me doing this project, no matter how much time it consumed throughout the day. And I'm overall really glad that I made the account, because I did find the community that it generated to be very motivating as well. So into the story itself, I legitimately found the first couple of days of NaNoWriMo to be the most difficult. As I said, this is my first time doing historical fiction, so with that comes the responsibility of being historically accurate, both in the timeline and in the culture. And as someone who has read a lot about ancient Rome, but would never consider himself to be an expert on it, I did find a lot of pressure there, mainly in the timeline, because if you don't know, the Julio-Claudian family tree is incredibly complicated and incredibly large, and trying to get everyone's ages right, or people who aren't even born yet, or people who are dead, and where they are in their life at this point, the start of the novel, which is about around 1716 BC, was extremely difficult at first, because you're trying to introduce all these characters, not even just in the Julio-Claudian family tree, which includes Tiberius, his brother Drusus, Tiberius' wife Vipsania, father Agrippa, Octavius, Livia, Varus Gallus, all these different characters, and trying to figure out where they are at this point, how old they are, what they would look like, especially the younger generation coming up, like the sons of Julia the Elder and Agrippa. Like, one of them is like 5 and one of them is 3, so you need to keep that in mind as well. And just having to keep up with all that, because you're trying to introduce all these characters, because this plot and the story is incredibly complex in the actual history. That was a huge deterrent in my writing the earlier days, because I did make a timeline during my Preptober month, and so that helped facilitate some things, but at the same time, I was constantly going back to the timeline. I was constantly going to Wikipedia and to other sources, like I have a bunch of ancient Roman books as well, going back to those to make sure I was being accurate to what I was supposed to be, which is, in retrospect, a huge waste of time, because, again, this is the whole point of NaNoWriMo, is that the 50,000 word manuscript you have at the end of the month is not supposed to be in any way the final product. So I could have just thrown caution to the wind for this moment and just wrote and made my life easier. But for some reason, especially earlier on, I had this huge pressure to be as historically accurate as possible, and it really took a lot of time for me to break away from that. But as the month went on, there were days where I wouldn't even touch the timeline or do any research, because on one hand, I knew the story by this point, I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew where everyone was historically for the most part, and also I just became more confident in the story that I was telling as well, and I didn't feel like I needed to rely on the timeline as much. So seeing that growth there both was rewarding from my perspective, and also saved me a ton of time later on. And I would definitely say as well that with the month of NaNoWriMo, around November 13th, I was really done. I didn't really want to work on this project anymore, because, again, it's like about on a bad day, it would probably take me about 2 hours to do the word count. On a good day, I could do it in like an hour to an hour and a half. But just by the 13th, I was like, man, I'm not even halfway through, and it's taking up so much time. And I'm happy that I've written this much, but at the same time, this is a very busy time in my life because I am finishing up grad school and I'm trying to apply for jobs as well. And I have this stupid NaNoWriMo project, which for some reason I decided to do right now during a stressful time in my life. And yeah, around the 13th, I was like, man, do I really have to do this for another 17 days? But then once we got past the halfway through mark, I really came into my own with the story, and it no longer became a chore for me, especially around the 20s, like November 20th to 30th. It was just like, it would no longer feel like an obligation. It was something I was looking forward to doing every day, and just getting over that halfway point hill was the most difficult part for me overall with this event. And I would also say for daily struggles with NaNoWriMo, the first 200 words were always the most difficult each day. Just like getting the gears turning was very difficult because normally, once I hit around 1667, between 1667 and 1680, I would just stop. Or I'd maybe finish a sentence, but I would stop. So then if I didn't finish a chapter or a scene by that point, I would have to be picking up the next day like halfway through a scene or like 2/3 of the way through a scene. And I'm like, okay, I'm not really in the headspace anymore to do this, but those 200 words starting off were always really difficult. And then the final 200 words were always difficult as well, because it's like you see the light at the end of the tunnel, and so all of a sudden 100 words is really difficult to write, and you're at least I was constantly going back to see, oh, did I hit it, and then no, until I eventually did hit it. But if you are writing, I would say, or if you did participate in it, you did find you didn't continue it because you found the writing to be difficult early on, I would say that for me as well, the first 200 words, between 200 and 300 words were always the most arduous to do for me. Eventually, too, I found the lack of editing to be very liberating as well, because, again, this can be very time-consuming for anyone, so you don't really have the time to edit your work. You just kind of want to write the words and be done with it. And eventually I found the lack of editing to be very liberating. I could just sit down and I'm like, I want to do this scene. I don't know if this scene is going to follow the last scene that I wrote, but I don't care. I have it in my mind, and it's going to facilitate the process of writing my word count for the day. So I'm just going to write it. And, this is a dumb line. Well, I'll fix it. I'll fix it later on. I got to keep going. And I found it to be really fun because in my writing, I really love to edit. I love to go back and reread things and stuff, but that is also very time-consuming as well. And so this was a breath of fresh air with regards to my own personal writing process as well. And ultimately, I think for first drafts from now on, like, I might just take on this philosophy of just keep going and worry about it later on. Because I mean, even with my book Hollow Stars, which I published in August, the first draft of that book is completely different from what the final product is for the most part. And even with that, I was constantly editing during the process. So it was a lot of that just a waste of time because I hadn't finished I should have focused on finishing the project first and then gone back once I had a better idea of what the story was as a whole, instead of just like focusing on the same 7 chapters I'd written over and over again to perfect them, even though I didn't really understand the true scope of the story yet. These are, nebulous questions, and to a certain extent I really enjoyed this philosophy, for at least for a first draft, of just go for it and worry about it later. And by the end of the month, I think, I don't really know, speaking of scopes of story, I would say I may be about 2/3 of the way through through the life of Tiberius I want to cover. Again, his early 20s rising through the ranks of politically and militarily up to his exile to Rhodes. And I'm around the point where he's married to Julia the Elder. And so I would say I'm about 2/3 of the way through how much progress I want to make. That could completely change, but at least in my head right now, it's about 2/3. And again, if I hadn't taken on NaNoWriMo, I would be 0/3 of the way through the story. So overall, incredibly worthwhile experience. And so the book is still nowhere near done. I still have a ton more to write for the first draft, and I have a lot of editing to do, a lot more researching to do as well. But 50,000 words, you can't you can't shame that. Like, it's 50,000 words done in a month. It's incredible. And it's way more progress than I would have made had I not taken on this adventure in the first place. So I'm so happy with participating and doing this project, because although there's still a lot more research I could do, a lot more editing I need to do, none of that would have gotten done. I would probably be delaying reading another biography on Tiberius for another few months or so, and then maybe by that point I would have completely, lost interest in the project as a whole. But finishing the 50,000 words, I'm more motivated now than ever to see this through, because I know that I can do it now. I know that I have a passion for it now, and that's the important part. So this is my update on NaNoWriMo. Sorry I haven't made a video for a while. Again, I couldn't really justify spending time making videos for this month, because I'm already wasting time to a certain extent doing NaNoWriMo when I have other obligations I need to fill. But I'll be making more videos in December, and I just really want to dedicate as much time as possible to NaNoWriMo, because once I learned what this event was, I really wanted to give it my all. And I think now that it's early December, I feel like I did pretty well, considering that it's 50,000 words nonstop, no going back or editing or anything. So I feel very fulfilled by taking on this project, and I feel like I've learned something both as myself as a writer, and also with the subject matter I was talking about. Because I said in my last video where I was going to start the NaNoWriMo project, like, I'm interested in Tiberius, the character, from a psychological standpoint, and sifting through the history to try to find my own truth in it. And although I don't think I'm there yet, I don't think I've found any groundbreaking revelations, I do feel like I have a better understanding of this time period because I've dived into it and because I have done the research from multiple sources, and I don't regret the time. I think it's been time well spent. So yeah, if you participated in NaNoWriMo, let me know how it went for you, what you're working on, and what your final results were, if you were happy with how you did. I'm legitimately interested in hearing that, and I'll be doing more BookTube related videos this month and in the future. So yeah, thank you, and check out my friends Colors Wonderland and Drunzo, and yeah, thank you for watching, and goodbye.